Hey everyone, dear friends, this is Drake on the Crime Story Diaries channel. Today we'll be examining a horrifying case, so I invite you to watch the video. Don't forget to leave your comments and likes. Ardeth Wood, a stunning 27-year-old, was not only beautiful, but also exceptionally intelligent. She was on the path to earning a doctoral degree in philosophy from Waterloo University, while simultaneously working as an editor for a philosophy journal. Ardeth's dream of becoming a professor was about to come true. The summer of 2003 arrived. Ardeth decided to spend her vacation visiting her family in Ottawa, Canada. She had a wonderful time with her loved ones, going on walks together and cooking at home. On the morning of August 6th, the young woman went for a run. When she returned, her thoughtful parents were already waiting for her with a delicious breakfast dessert. It was a warm and sunny day, so Ardeth decided to go for a bike ride. Her brother kindly allowed her to borrow his bicycle. The girl promised to be back in a couple of hours. That day, her mother planned to go shopping before lunch, awaiting her daughter's return from the ride. Ardeth loved cycling along the picturesque route through the forest, past the river and cliffs. This trail was popular among local cyclists. It was always peaceful and safe here, but not this time. 27-year-old Ardeth never came home. Her mother was worried about her, and then a heavy downpour started. The woman understood that her daughter wouldn't be riding in such weather, but time passed, and she still wasn't back. The family set out to search, assuming the girl might have fallen off her bike and needed help. Bike paths wound through the entire city, and they didn't know which direction Ardeth had gone this time, so her relatives searched all over town. Their efforts were fruitless, and when it got dark, they went to the police. Due to the bad weather, the search was postponed until morning. The next day, there was no news about Ardeth. One of the largest search operations in Ottawa's history began. It involved rescuers, police officers, dog handlers with their canines, and helicopters. In total, about 1,000 people, including numerous volunteers. Ardeth's family actively participated in the search, posting flyers with the girl's photo all around the city. But the first few days yielded no progress. The police turned to the public for help. Soon, a call came from a local resident. She said that on the day of Ardeth's disappearance, she was in the forest on the bike path and saw a creepy guy with a bicycle there. The witness described him as a young man with a pleasant appearance, well-dressed, but behaving extremely suspiciously. His conduct was frightening. It turned out the stranger had tried to push the girl off her bike and drag her into the bushes. Fortunately, other people appeared on the trail. The perpetrator fell behind, and she managed to escape quickly. After this incident, she no longer felt safe on walks and stopped cycling alone. According to the girl, it happened in an area called Green Creek. She suggested that the stranger might have attacked Ardeth as well. The eyewitness was invited to the police station to create a composite sketch. She described the suspect as a young man, 30 years old, light-skinned, dark-haired, with a beard and glasses, pleasant-looking and athletically built. The sketch was shown to Ardeth's family, but they didn't recognize anyone familiar to the missing woman. Many men wore similar glasses and beards at the time, so suspicion could fall on anyone. The investigators decided not to publish the portrait in the media, fearing a wave of false calls. The police constantly asked local residents for help, showing Ardeth's photo. Law enforcement was confident. Such a bright, beautiful girl with a memorable appearance couldn't have gone unnoticed. Someone must have seen her and could provide a lead. This assumption proved true. 16-year-old Laura called the police. She said that on the day of the disappearance, while riding past on her bicycle, she saw Ardeth on the bike trail. The missing woman was sitting on a rock, seemingly resting. When Laura rode further, she heard a scream. Turning around, the girl saw Ardeth arguing with some guy. Laura didn't know what to think. Maybe it was just a lover's quarrel. Ardeth wasn't calling for help, and then she went into the woods with that man. Laura wanted to find out what was happening, but got scared. Seeing the approaching storm, the 16-year-old witness hurried home. As she was leaving, she thought she heard someone screaming. The police invited Laura to the station to show her the composite sketch of the stranger. She recognized him. According to the girl, it all happened around 1 p.m. in the same place, Green Creek. Later, the police received several more calls from girls who had encountered this creepy guy on the trail. He attacked them, but the victims were lucky to escape. One woman's call particularly stood out. She recounted how an attractive stranger approached her during a walk. They had a pleasant conversation, but suddenly his behavior changed drastically. The man started grabbing her, but the woman managed to push the attacker away with her bicycle and quickly flee. She didn't even look back, afraid he would catch up. After returning home, the woman told her family about the incident and warned her loved ones to stay away from that place. Oddly, none of the girls who were attacked reported it to the police. The search for Ardeth concentrated around the creek area. Soon, her bicycle was found, indicating the police were on the right track. Meanwhile, the investigators received another call that became a breakthrough in the case. A man, without giving his name, reported an unpleasant incident in the forest. A terrible accident. Allegedly, he didn't want to harm Ardeth or take her life. Confused, he decided to get rid of the body. The stranger carried the girl across the creek, dug a small pit and buried her there, covering the grave with branches. Then he hung up. The police managed to trace the call. It was made from a phone booth 20 minutes away from Ottawa. Law enforcement rushed there, hoping to find witnesses or lift fingerprints or DNA from the receiver. But disappointment awaited them. Someone had thoroughly wiped the handset. Neither eyewitnesses nor surveillance cameras could be found. The search for Ardeth continued in Green Creek. Dogs trained to detect the smell of corpses arrived at the scene. Soon, the worst fears of the family and the police were confirmed. With the help of the dogs, they managed to find the missing woman's grave, located between 2 trees in a quiet, picturesque spot. Coming closer, the detectives saw the half-buried, naked body of the girl. Likely, the criminal was startled by someone, which is why he buried the victim so sloppily. Criminologists started examining the crime scene, but, unfortunately, found no evidence, no fingerprints or DNA. The medical examiner confirmed it was Ardeth Wood. She died a horrific, agonizing death that didn't resemble an accident at all, contrary to what the stranger said in his conversation with the police. The cause of death was drowning. Algae were found in her lungs, so the girl was still alive when she ended up in the water. Despite the body being found naked, the medical examiners didn't find unequivocal signs of rape, although they didn't rule it out. The police believed the crime was sexually motivated. In their opinion, the stranger hunted girls in a deserted place for this purpose. Otherwise, what else could have driven him? The detectives needed to catch the criminal urgently to avoid new victims. They were convinced he had attacked several girls and had already killed one. How far could the maniac go? The police decided to publish a composite sketch of the suspect in the media, asking the public for help in identifying him. Investigators received about 4,000 calls with leads and began processing them, which took a lot of time. On September 10th, the police released important information about the suspect. It turned out that the girls who saw the stranger in the forest had noticed one detail. He had an eagle tattoo on his left shoulder. This was a crucial lead that could help track down the criminal. The media published a sketch of the tattoo, after which several calls came to the police. People reported acquaintances with bird tattoos on their faces, necks, or backs. However, this information led nowhere. In April 2004, while processing another batch of calls, investigators came across an important clue. A man claimed he knew the killer. The person lived in the area and was riding a bicycle in the Green Creek vicinity at the time of the crime. The detectives were interested in this information and invited the specified suspect for a conversation. When the guy entered the police station, the investigators were amazed. He matched the criminal's description both in appearance and age. During the conversation, the young man was noticeably nervous. He said he often rode his bike along that trail, not understanding what the issue was. When the police asked him to show his shoulder, an eagle tattoo was found there. It turned out that the man had previously had problems with the law. He became the prime suspect. The interrogation lasted 3 hours. The entire time, the suspect answered questions defiantly and aggressively. He said about himself, "I'm like a scorpion under a rock. You never know what I'm going to do." The guy had no alibi but couldn't say what he was doing on the day of Ardeth's disappearance. However, he denied involvement in the girl's murder. There was insufficient evidence against him, so the suspect was released but placed under surveillance. A few weeks later, he was invited for questioning again. The detectives had gathered a lot of information about him and carefully prepared their questions. They also suggested the young man take a polygraph test. The suspect agreed and easily passed all the tests. The police couldn't believe it but had to let him go, dropping all suspicions. The investigation had reached a dead end. The Ottawa police announced a $50,000 reward for any information that would help solve the case. It was the largest amount law enforcement had ever offered under similar circumstances. Soon, about 5,000 calls with leads came in, which the police began to check. One portion of information mentioned the name Christopher Myers, which caught the investigators' attention. It turned out he had previous convictions for selling prohibited substances. Colleagues described 25-year-old Chris as a quiet, non-confrontational, and even inconspicuous guy who worked as a janitor. His face was remarkably similar to the composite sketch of the suspect. Moreover, he had the same beard. The police were delighted, thinking they had finally found the right man. But it turned out Christopher had an alibi for the day of Ardeth's disappearance. The landlady of the apartment he was renting claimed that on August 6, 2003, the young man was at home in the morning and then went to work at a restaurant. This surprised the police because a year had already passed. How could the woman remember the details of that day so clearly? Another problem arose. Christopher didn't have an eagle tattoo on his shoulder, although witnesses insisted they had seen this tattoo on him. Maybe he had it removed. The detectives were convinced this was the person they needed and had to prove it. A few weeks later, another similar attack occurred. In the evening, a girl who closely resembled Ardeth was walking alone across a bridge when she heard someone walking behind her. Turning around, she saw an attractive man on a bicycle. The girl had no intention of making acquaintances or talking and asked to be left alone. The man rode past her, and just as she sighed with relief, the stranger turned his bicycle around and rushed straight at her. There was no one around who could help. The attacker jumped off his bike and forcibly dragged the victim into the bushes. The girl screamed very loudly, which seemed to frighten the assailant. He fled. The victim went to the police. Other investigators took on this case. Everyone assumed it was an attempted robbery, and the detectives investigating Ardeth's disappearance found out about the incident much later. In May, another attack occurred on a tall blonde woman similar to the missing person. The girl was returning late in the evening from a party when a stranger approached her and tried to strike up a conversation. She asked to be left alone. Then he started asking for help, claiming he was lost. The girl explained where he should go, and he left. She breathed a sigh of relief, but literally 10 minutes later, he attacked her from the bushes. The assailant furiously began strangling her, twisting her neck. At that moment, the girl thought it was the end, but she continued to resist, screaming, hitting him, biting. Her screams attracted the attention of the residents of the building who came out to see what was happening. This frightened the criminal and he fled, but this time he made a serious mistake. In his haste, he dropped his phone. Investigators established that the mobile belonged to Christopher Myers, whom they suspected in the Ardeth murder case. The puzzle came together. Chris committed all the similar crimes. He chose girls with similar appearances, blondes, and attacked them. Christopher was brought in for questioning, but he wasn't in a hurry to confess to the murder. He said he had never been to Green Creek, had never seen Ardeth, and wasn't involved in the other attacks. Chris complained about mental health issues and uncontrollable aggression, but insisted he hadn't caused physical harm to anyone. The detectives noticed he had crooked teeth and persuaded him to take a polygraph test. The test lasted 5 hours, and Chris failed it miserably. But despite this, he still continued to claim his innocence, saying the polygraph was wrong. Since the results of the lie detector test weren't considered evidence, the suspect had to be released. For the next 5 months, detectives gathered evidence against him, interrogating everyone who knew Christopher. relatives, friends, colleagues, and his ex-girlfriend. It turned out Christopher was born into a dysfunctional family of alcoholics. His difficult childhood was accompanied by the development of various mental disorders, attention deficit disorder and schizoid disorder. Chris was taken from his birth family and adopted by another couple. The adoptive parents treated the boy with love, but he was uncontrollable. They couldn't cope with raising the troubled child and returned him to the orphanage when Chris turned 12. As he grew older, he seemed to become an ordinary, normal guy. Christopher graduated from school, entered university, socialized with friends, and lived in a dormitory. But his roommate considered Chris abnormal. He told creepy stories that frightened her. Eventually, she kicked him out of the room. Chris's ex-girlfriend revealed that he loved cycling along the trails of Ottawa and was fascinated by the picturesque scenery. She also disclosed his main secret. Christopher enjoyed temporary tattoos. For a while, he had the exact image of an eagle on his shoulder. The girl was shown a sketch of the tattoo, and she confirmed that he had the same one on his left shoulder. Christopher was summoned for questioning on October 13, 2005. He was placed in a very cramped interrogation room. This time, the conversation was conducted by burly men who pushed their chairs right up against Chris. All this put tremendous psychological pressure on the suspect. The investigators started with simple words. "We know everything about you, Chris. We know it was you who killed Ardeth." Christopher responded evasively. 3 hours later, he began to give testimony, confused and inconsistent. Chris admitted that he was in Green Creek that day and met Ardeth. Struck by her beauty, he decided to get acquainted. He started giving compliments, chatting nicely, and then invited the girl into the woods, and she agreed. Once there, Christopher began hugging and kissing her, showing the detectives exactly how. And then, according to him, it all ended. Ardeth recoiled from him. Apparently, she didn't like his manners. She ran away but fell into the creek. Christopher tried to save the girl but failed. He wanted to portray himself as a hero, but this absolutely didn't correspond to his subsequent actions. For some reason, he pulled Ardeth's body out of the water, undressed it, and buried it. When the policeman stated that Chris was going to be charged with murder, he immediately retracted his words. "No, I never met her. It was a joke. I took all the information from the newspapers." The detective had to have a serious one-on-one conversation with him. Eventually, Chris confessed to killing Ardeth. He even drew a map with the trails in Green Creek where he met the girl. On it, he marked another person, probably 16-year-old Laura, who saw him with the victim in the forest. Laura recognized the suspect as the same man she had seen then. Christopher was arrested on October 20th, 2005. He agreed to go to the crime scene to recreate the events. But when they arrived at the indicated trail, Christopher suddenly declared that it wasn't the right location, claiming everything happened elsewhere, although everything matched. Christopher had an unstable psyche. He would give testimony and then retract his words. Later, he also confessed to other attacks on girls. He was charged with additional crimes for these offenses. At the trial, the lawyer stated that Christopher was just a troubled young man. At first, the accused denied his previous confessions, but later, on the advice of his defense attorney, he decided to make a deal with the investigation and plead guilty. On January 8, 2008, 5 years after the murder, the defendant confessed to the crime but refused to disclose the motives and details. Later, he also admitted to the other attacks. The prosecution believed that on that day, Chris wasn't on the forest trail by chance. He was stalking his prey like a hunter. He attacked several girls who were lucky enough to escape. The likely motive was sexual assault. Ardeth was unlucky that day. She was Christopher's type, an attractive blonde. He tried to get acquainted with her, but something went wrong, and an argument broke out between them, which was overheard by a teenage girl riding by. Under some pretext, the killer managed to lure Ardeth into the woods. There, he attacked her, started undressing her, intending to rape her. To save herself, the girl ran away and jumped into the creek. Chris rushed after her, caught up, and drowned her, then buried the body. The victim's parents agreed with the prosecution's version. According to them, Ardeth was a good swimmer and couldn't have drowned in the creek. In their opinion, the defendant deliberately drowned the girl. However, it remained a mystery to them how Christopher managed to convince Ardeth to go into the woods with him. As part of the deal with the investigation, Christopher pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with the right to parole only after 10 years. In 2020, he filed a relevant petition, but the commission rejected it, recognizing the high risk of repeated crimes against women. In 2007, a plaque in memory of Ardeth was installed on one of the centuries-old oaks in Green Creek Park. And in 2017, during a powerful thunderstorm, just like on the day of her murder, lightning struck the same tree. The oak suffered serious damage, and experts didn't believe it would survive. But a miracle happened. The mighty tree withstood. It still grows as a living monument to the girl who was killed nearby. Share your thoughts in the comments and leave a like if this story touched you. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new episodes. Thank you for your attention.